Goods. Miranda.
Here.
And Citro.
Here.
We have a physical quorum.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 77, file number CM 22-77457.
Afternoon, Council. Carl Boyd with the Legal Department. I'm here to discuss with you the report provided specifically regarding an update on where we are with the cemeteries at College Hill and Robles Cemetery. If you read through the memo, you see that we have a concern with doing a forced GPR, ground penetrating radar, on any of these sites because they are private property and they have all the protections that private properties get, which means that we cannot forcibly or require them to do a GPR. But administration did negotiate with the Italian Club, and they have agreed to do the GPR. I think it's been discussed earlier today. And so the GPR has been undertaken. They've agreed to provide us the results of that report, and then we can take next steps from there once we determine what those results are. Also, I want you to be aware that the City Parks and Recreation Department is looking at the issue, and the plan is to increase some of our regulations internally through county policy, or through city policy. So the key there is that city cemeteries will be protected consistent with what the previous request of council was, which is to prohibit parking and to prohibit loading. I think last time we talked about that there are events held at these cemeteries, and we didn't want it to be so broad as to prohibit those. So we're going to move forward with limiting parking on city cemeteries and any loading or any other activities that aren't consistent with the cemetery property. And finally, if I can, just an update that the state law is being updated right now, and that's going to be good. There's going to be a new program. It's going to provide extra protections for abandoned cemeteries. And particularly, most importantly for us here, is it's going to provide grant opportunities for the city to receive grants to help restore and maintain abandoned cemeteries. So that's just a quick update on where we are right now, and I'm available for any questions you might have.
Councilman Goods.
Well, I'm glad we looked into the state situation, like I told you, because I knew it was changing.
Yes.
So I'm glad we're doing that. I still haven't got much detail on the 30th and Sly situation.
We're working, when I say we are, administration is working on trying to track down and negotiate an agreement with the owners of 30th and Sly. You know, that's a smaller cemetery.
Right.
So they're working on tracking that down. And we'll try to get the same agreement we have with the Italian Club, which is you go ahead and do the GPR, or allow us to move forward and do the GPR, and we'll get the results and determine what's under the ground there.
So Carl, do we know, because you have the actual cemetery it's to the west a little bit.
Yes.
And you got the open field to the east. So is that all part of it, or is that it's an open piece of parcel there? What is the differentiation on it?
From my understanding, the actual Robles Park Cemetery is that smaller area. So that's the area, you know, if there was a problem, if there was any underground graves there, there'd be adjacent to that smaller property. So that's kind of the search that would need to be done on that.
But there's a sole owner for for both those pieces, or all that parcel right there from the 30th, from the north west corner of 30th and Sly, all the way up to the main portion of the cemetery?
That's what we had to look into and see what the specific parameters of the Robles Cemetery is and the ownership on that. Because you're right, there is a large lot that's next door to it, and we have to determine who the owner of that is, and then enter into the same negotiations we're talking about that we did with the Italian Club in order to get the GPR. Same underlying issues, though.
So we're looking at another 60, 90 days before we can come in for a full report to the council on that, especially on that Robles and 30th Street, 30th and Sly?
Yeah, I'll coordinate with admin and see where we are in terms of getting that information for you.
All right, thank you. I think the public will want to know that, because like I said, you know, it's utilized for all kind of things, and people have been complaining for years and years.
Right.
And I know it's like a little swap shop sometimes for folks in the community to do that, but still, you know, some things are sacred and should be left as sacred, you know?
I agree. And that's what we're looking to do, and definitely any property that we own. we're gonna treat in the proper manner.
I'm good, sir.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Carl, for your work on this. I really appreciate it. So, when it comes to the Italian Club and the inspection that's going to be happening, are we going to be there at all, or we're just going to get the report, or how does that work?
Yeah, that was the agreement, that they would do the search and then they would provide us the report.
Cool. And could we, and maybe we'll cross that bridge whenever it happens, but and I'm not an expert on these scans at all. But I mean, I've whenever you deal with experts on things, there's different ways to do things, et cetera. So we'll cross that bridge, I guess, whenever it comes, and whatnot. One thing I would ask you to do is, I see Miss Alderman, who's here, and she's been not so instrumental. She's been instrumental. It's because of her that all this has come forward. Is if y'all could always keep her updated and whatnot on stuff, and if my office needs to help with that, that would be great. But yeah, we'll just wait on the report and see what it happens and see where it goes. And I'm sure that this will return to us. And if I know Councilman Goose brought this forward, if you wanted to have this returned to us whenever, when are we expecting the report again? I know you said that.
So the report we would expect sometime in May,
Okay.
mid-May. So maybe if we bring this back in. Well, if we say 60 days, that definitely gives us time to have a chance to review it and then give you a good objective response to the results.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want a motion for it?
He was gonna let us know when he got into the rush.
No, he said 60 days.
Yeah, he said 60.
Carl, is 60 days enough time to bring back the report?
I would think so. I mean, if we want to move back 90 days, that's fine.
Because even though we're up in Italian, we still need to know about 30th and Sly. What are we going to do with 30th and Sly? Where are we at in the process of that?
Well, we need both of them to,
Right.
when we come back, we need to have all information. So if we do 90 days, that'll give us more than enough time to take care of both those issues, clean them up, and have a final response for you.
How about July 13th?
July 13th sounds great.
Good a time. Is that good for you?
Second. For July 13th, 2023. Understand?
We have a motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any objection? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have to go to agenda item number 67. It's asking for, is that withdrawn or?
Continuance.
Thank you. Till what day?
Kamaria Pettis-Macker from the City Attorney's Office. The request is to continue this hearing to the September 21st, 2023 public hearing.
The 1:30 public hearing.
We got a motion by Councilman Good, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Please proceed.
The request is to continue review hearing for ARC 22-180 to the September 21st, 2023 public hearing, and I believe it'll be at 10:30 a.m.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Good, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 78, file number CM 22-74623.
Good afternoon, Andrea Zellman, City Attorney. This is the request for the resolution setting forth the process by which the city would advise the individual members of City Council should anyone in the city receive notice that the city is under investigations for violation of civil rights statutes. It's pretty straightforward. It's what we discussed when this motion was made. The only thing I wanted to mention, I know when Councilman Carlson originally made the motion, he asked for 10-day notice. Given that, sometimes there's holidays, there's short weeks, whatever, I thought it was reasonable to change it to 14 days, just to, in case. The other thing is, I think at one point in time, the motion referenced criminal investigations, and while I'm no subject matter expert on those, what I have come to learn is basically you're not notified when you're under investigation for violation of criminal laws typically. So it really wouldn't be necessary or realistic to have a process for that, because it's so incredibly unlikely that the city as an entity would be notified that it was being investigated for violation of crimes. I'm not even sure how a city as an entity could commit a crime, but that's another issue. So in any event, that was, I just wanted to point those out. Again, I think the resolution's straightforward. I can describe the process again if you would like. We discussed it when the motion was made, or we can skip that part.
Any questions? Councilman Carlson?
I just, not a question, I just want to say thank you. Again, this is like the sixth time that you and your department have partnered with us to get something done and bring it in for a landing, so I want to thank you and your team. And I'm happy to make a motion to, do we need to read it, or move the I'd like to move the resolution.
Thank you. And off topic, but earlier today, Nicole Travis mentioned something about a press conference at Tampa Hope. And I asked, and I just wanted to assure council, because I know this is a sensitive topic, the press conference was not organized by the city of Tampa. It was organized by Tampa Hope. They did it for the date and time that worked best for their schedule. The city didn't have control over that. So I did ask, just want to make sure to make you all aware of that.
Thank you.
So.
Once again, who made the resolution to file number CM 22-74623? Councilman Carlson, and you seconded?
Yeah.
Councilman Carlson made a motion, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 80, file number CM 23-80251.
Good afternoon, City Council. Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney. I'm here on item number 80, file number CM-80251, to report on a process to inform City Council as to when there is a request for proposal and request for qualifications earlier in the RFP process. And I had the opportunity to speak with the City Attorney and the Chief of Staff, and I also had very interesting and informative conversations with both Greg Spearman in purchasing and with Brad Baird in contract administration. And what I'd like to do is I passed out some slides and just talk to you about the process. It's interesting that Council had a good discussion today during administrative update regarding the CIP. And a lot of what is planning for construction is contained within the CIP, and that is a programmed 5-year plan. So when Council does have those briefings and those workshops and the discussion during the charter, that is very much giving you the roadmap of what is forthcoming. And of course, when you have these updates, you're being told perhaps of the processes that are underway, the projects that are underway, but it's also an opportunity to learn what is forthcoming, so you will have advance notice of where the city is. And again, a CIP is a living document. So as things are supposed to move up each year, sometimes situations change, the economy changes, priorities change, and the CIP somewhat changes. So you have the opportunity to also inquire of changes from, let's say, 1 year's CIP to the next year, to be able to get a sense of what priorities, if any, are changing within the city. Now, there are really some really good resources, and I'm not saying this just for the benefit of the City Council, because I'm saying this for the benefit of the public too, that the city's website contains a lot of information that is all useful. And what I'm going to be sharing with you, and I've prepared some slides, all from the city's website, the city's webpage. And this is not the intranet. This is not within the city. This is available to the public at tampa.gov, tampa.gov. So I just want to put this down just to show you some of the sources where you and members of the public can hear about things before they end up on the consent docket or under staff reports for the approval of a contract. This is a very interesting interactive site, and all you have to do to get to this is in the search bar, you put in CIP, and it'll take you right there. And this is the Capital Improvement Projects Viewer, and what it does is it gives you information as to specific projects. It also breaks it down to many different funding sources. It breaks it down into districts. It breaks it down into neighborhoods, and you can actually see what's being proposed and what's being underway. And this is updated regularly. I believe this is updated on a monthly basis. Now, Council, you had the benefit of a presentation on January 26th where the administration reported to you about the CIP process, that you are continuing to move forward, and you just set an additional workshop on that subject. And with that, you had a whole discussion about the kind of interaction that the public has and that the administration has with you to be able to keep you informed. And I believe that the direction that Council is taking with the administration to have these regular updates will certainly be of benefit to you, because it'll be brought up to date, and you will be brought up to date, and you will have the opportunity to engage the administration and ask questions about upcoming projects or projects that are under construction. Now, one of the interesting things here is that if the public is interested, that whole presentation, by the way, is available on this website just by putting in CIP in the search bar, and it takes you to what the presentation was made on January 26th. You have the PowerPoint there, so the public can look at that and see what the administration has proposed. And also there's an excellent, about a 3-minute video that actually instructs you on how to use the CIP viewer. So that is an asset that you and the public can take advantage of to see what is in the pipeline for the capital improvements. Now, going to another website, and the way to get to these websites for members of the public is, you see where it says government at the top. It's a drop down. It's at the right to the left of the word jobs at the far right corner, and you drop down on the word government and you go to departments. And when you go to departments, it'll list all the departments of the city. You scroll down to contract administration, and it takes you to their landing page. And there are some very useful links that will inform you about what is happening with regard to contract administration. Now, the city has the department that is called contract administration, and that is really for capital projects, obviously the administration of the contracts, and it's those things that are, how do they put it, vertical or in the ground, things that are built. And what's interesting there is that you have links to the left that are useful. One of those is a link that we'll get to in a minute, where it just says purchasing bids, and it takes you to purchasing. But what is very interesting in contract administration is the link at the bottom that says Future Projects Report. And you see that where it says Learn More About. And when you take that, it's interesting because what that does and this is updated monthly. And all of these are kept current by the departments so that you are apprised, as well as the public is apprised, of all of these projects. And you can see, let's say, for instance, just the top line, the Waters Avenue Gravity Sewer Rehabilitation by CIPP, and it tells you the cost estimate. And it also has estimated RFQ or bid advertising month. Now, with regard to bids or RFQs or RFPs, it's an involved process, so I learned, to the point where it gets to be released or broadcast. And from the time that it's released and broadcast, there's a certain cone of silence as to communications about being able to discuss these. Now, obviously, you as city council members, if you see there's something that has your interest, you certainly have the ability and the opportunity and are encouraged to pick up the phone and talk to the administrator or the department heads to get your questions answered. If it's something that you think needs to be brought to city council, you certainly have the opportunity to do that. But what's interesting is it tells you the department, but it also tells you about the estimated RFQ or bid advertising month, and you could see how this is working forward and goes down the list. Obviously, some things are to be determined. Now, if I go to page 2 here, you will see that there are some things set forth in red, and it tells you some things are delayed, some things have a date, and some things are to be determined. Now, again, if there's anything that interests you as a council member or a constituent that's brought to your attention, when you see that and you don't fully have the depth of knowledge of what that particular project is something that you can drill down, talking to the department and get the additional information that can help you be prepared for these things coming forth in advance. So using tools like this, council can keep itself informed about the future projects. And lastly, if I were to click the department that says purchasing, or if I were to click the quick link on the contract administration page, it would take me here. Likewise, if you notice on this, you could actually have a quick link. Let me make this a little bit bigger for the benefit of the public. You also have a direct link here for contract administration, so you can get to that department quickly. Now, with regard to the purchasing department, they don't deal with construction. They deal with purchasing. And what the tool that they use primarily is called DemandStar. And DemandStar is a platform that you can get to information, but in order to drill down further, as it's presently set up, and for many reasons, security reasons being one of them, and you cannot actually get to necessarily the documents that way unless you are registered as a DemandStar user. Now, maybe it can be set up, I believe that there is a platform called Get All that through internally they may be able to get that and set that up for council if that's council's interest to want to be able to drill down. Obviously, again, what you have here is quick links on the left, and to learn more about every one of those live links provide you the ability for information. And you can get, for instance, to the legal advertisement to find out what the legal ads are. But within the RFPs, sometimes it takes a little bit more to drill down, and if you need to be able to get to it by registering for DemandStar, and it's council's pleasure to want to have access to that, council can work with the department, with the administration, to be able to provide you additional information. So, long story short, there is information on the city's website to both council and to the public to be able to tell what's forthcoming so that you have the opportunity to be able to be apprised of information before it shows up on the consent docket or before it shows up on the staff reports. And also, if you wish to have additional information or you have additional questions, I know we're running a little bit late and I don't want to take up any more of time, but a suggestion had come up that in the future, if council wants to set forth a workshop to talk about the process of what it takes to create an RFP or to create an RFQ, so you could see what goes into the process before it comes to council, and also to inform the public of additional tools that you may feel are necessary. If it's council's pleasure, we can schedule a workshop in the future, and we can work with the administration and invite the departments to be able to apprise you further. That's my report. Thank you.
Councilman Goode, this was your motion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shelby, for doing some of the legwork. You know, a lot of questions have been come up about contracts this last 4 years of these RFPs, and that's why I brought up how's it mandated, how is it written, how is it come before council beforehand, before sending it out. So maybe going forward, as council, or whatever council maybe want to do a workshop, so councilmen are aware of how that process actually works. I think it would be very good to have, because I think the public would like to know too, and it may be the situation we've had in the past with these contracts, or why the dollar amounts are here or there, and we might get some answers beforehand instead of afterhand.
I have broached that subject with the administration and speaking with the chief of staff and the city attorney, and I believe the administration is amenable to doing that.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, first I know that Chief of Staff's been looking at this department since I had first had concerns anyway 4 years ago, and now he's got Brad Brad Baird in there, and they're trying to turn it around and fix it. The community has a lot of concerns about contract administration in particular, and the high number of no bid contracts, and we've had presentations on it 2 or 3 times, and the presentations end up being explaining the difference between sole source and single bid contracts versus talking to us about how to end them. The last time I counted a few weeks ago, we had still about 15% single bid contracts. And there's certain situations where one vendor is the only one that makes a certain chemical and we can only buy from them. But when we started 4 years ago, there was a purchase of HD cameras for the police helicopters, and the criteria was set for 30 miles, and there was a vendor in Orlando that was 85 miles away, and they didn't qualify, but the vendor that did qualify was exactly 30 miles away. And that's the kind of thing that we need to end. It looks like target RFPs, and the community is very concerned about it because they want competitiveness and they want good pricing. We also, so single bid contracts are one thing. In the past, the community has complained to say it seems like some RFPs are pushed out and some aren't. I think that this happened more in the last administration than this one. I mean, in 6 years ago or so, there was a piece of property that sold, and then not a short time after, developers flipped it for 50 or 100% more, and so that's in real estate. But we need to focus on all that. We need to make sure that the RFPs are open. But my big concern related to this is I mean, the competitiveness is a huge concern, but the second concern is that city council needs to know, at the very least, when a big RFP is awarded, and the same thing with these other things we have, maybe over 20 million or over 50 million. But an example, the Rome Yard project was awarded. Staff had some kind of process that was awarded. There was a press conference to say that it was awarded. The first time it was presented to city council was a year later when the contract had been negotiated. There was no opportunity for us to weigh in at all. And I would suggest that at the very least, contracts over 50 million, when the RFP is awarded, that staff would come explain it to us. Because we're going to get questions from the public. That one, there was a lot of media coverage. We got questions of the public. We didn't know how to answer anything. Sure, we could talk to staff individually, but it would be better to have transparency in how to discuss it. Maybe the threshold is 20 million instead of 50, I don't know. But the other thing is, on big RFPs that are complicated, the more the staff briefs us, and especially if they brief us publicly, then the public knows. The more they brief us on the process they're using, the better it will be. And in that Rome Yard case, again, I think it would have benefited us all had the staff discuss it. Some of the really big contracts have a lot of controversy attached to them. And whether there was anything bad that happened or not, the more transparency we provide before, during, and after the RFP process, the better it is for the public to understand. And in that way, we prevent lots of questions and speculation, and everybody knows exactly what happened. So thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Councilman Good.
And on that note, Mr. Carlson, because sometimes you look at some of these RFPs, it seems like it's driven for a certain particular person to get the contract. And that's the problem I have. And that's the problem the community is saying, that when they're written, we don't know until the after effect. And it's like we're the cleanup guys to ask questions after the fact versus us seeing up front what did you just put out to the public? Or how is this contract curtailed to make sure it's fair for everyone to be able to bid on it? I think that's the key to it all, making sure that the process is fair and that we're able to look at and see to make sure that certain things are not omitted that should be in there to make sure that everyone's getting an opportunity to bid.
Well, that raises the question then of what goes into the creation of an RFP or an RFQ.
That's why I think I kind of asked about that. What was
And I've
I asked that.
it is a more complicated, longer process than, and as a matter of fact, it was for me also a learning experience about how the organization does it. Of course, in the framework that we have is under the charter, the mayor negotiates the contracts. The mayor is responsible for that. I think it's a worthy discussion, council. I would recommend it. The administration, I think, would be supportive of informing council about that process, and if you have concerns, then perhaps they can be addressed in some form or fashion within the framework that we have.
I don't have an issue with the mayor negotiating the contract. You know, I mean, but at the end of the day, this council approves the contract, correct?
Yes, and as you know, that's at the end of the day.
Correct. So again, even though they can negotiate, I still think there's a process in there before it even gets to us even talking about approving it, for us to be able to look and see what's in there, because it may be conversation to tell the administration, take that back. It needs to be negotiated a different way.
And that is a discussion that we can have with the administration. That is a concern because there's also the thing is, because I believe there was a comment before, during, and after the RFP, but before the RFP, there is usually a pre-bid meeting or a meeting that's accessible, that people can find out through the Demand Star or through the website before it's broadcast. And then maybe Marcy can help about the process. But my understanding is that once an RFP is sent out, there are certain parameters in terms of negotiation. It's meant to be, ideally, and of course, a lot of it is governed by the CCNA, which you've heard about. It's governed by state statute about the process for, let's say, architects and the like, and other professionals. But with regard to creating a means to be able to change an RFP and RFQ, that's a discussion that, frankly, raises some concern for the administration because of the fact that what we have here is we have a process that's set up to actually be somewhat hands-off and not subject to pressure, I guess, from political pressure, for lack of a better term. So you ask a very good question. I understand council's concerns, and you hear those from your constituents. And if that's a question that needs to be discussed further, then I would suggest that council either schedule a workshop somewhere down the line, or we can ask for a staff report, or we can talk. I can continue the dialogue with the administration. The meeting that I had with the city attorney and the chief of staff were particularly about the process and the concerns about interfering not necessarily causing it interference, but in terms of being able to have the process follow its normal course to the point where ultimately the decision to be made should not be driven by anything other than the criteria that makes them the best person, the best company selected. So I understand what council's concern is. I don't know how best to recommend to address that, except for the fact that once you spend time learning of what the process is, and then you can learn about where along the line you can insert council's opportunity for input, then you can actually take more effective action. One of the things that you can do is, again, with regard particularly to the CIP, is to find out what's in the pipeline, what's going to be forthcoming, and what then is the process. How do you intend you could ask the administration, how do you intend to move forward on this particular project?
Mr. Shelby, I'm sure that this is not the first time some city has had this kind of question or challenge. There's got to be a process out there that someone else is using in reference to what we're asking or looking for.
I understand what you're saying.
So I hear you talking about the administration. I don't really care what the administration say. I'm asking for your, as a city attorney, to come and give us facts of what is out there. The administration can tell if it's blue, but actually it could be green.
So what you're looking for me to do then is to do a comparison about how similarly situated cities in Florida, let's say, dealing with these issues, address the same kind of concerns, and particularly with, let's say, a strong mayor form of government. I don't want to use that term. I use the term of an elected mayor form of government. Is that what council wishes? If that's council's pleasure, that's the direction I'll take. I'm happy to do that.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shelby,
Yes.
the references that were made, I'm just talking as a John Q. Public, and I see ads in the St. Pete, Tampa Bay Times on Wednesdays and Sundays. That's the only 2 days they print. I don't do the others. But they do Monday, the rest of the days they do on the computers and so forth. But I see ads that says City of Tampa or Hillsborough County or St. Pete or Clearwater. And those ads, I guess, are asking people that the city is, this city and other cities are gonna have a certain project that they need from point A to point B, whatever that may be, or a building or whatever. And there's a request for RFQ, I guess that's request for qualifications. Then there's a request for RFP. Can you tell the public what they are?
Yes, one is a request for
But they
proposal,
understand.
and the other is a request for qualifications. A request for proposal would be something done through purchasing. Purchasing does primarily RFPs, and that's for purchasing commodities and the like, whereas RFQs are situations where it is looking for qualified applicants, and those then go to a committee, and then and again, that's the whole process, so I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version, and those are ranked, and those are presented to the administration for a recommendation, and then, and what happens then, yes, you had a...
No, go on, I'm just thinking a little bit more. So then all these cities, including this one, you said they have a committee that reviews the applicants that apply. Somewhere along the line it goes for pricing, who has the best price. Am I correct, or maybe I'm not correct?
No, and I think...
I
think Ms. Hamilton is actively engaged in the process through the legal department,
Not with CCNA anymore.
not with CCNA anymore.
Marcy Hamilton, Legal Department. The RFP process, RFQ process, cost is not necessarily the primary reason for awarding a bid. You have to look at the qualifications of the actual firm, what their past work has been. There's various aspects. We also deal with the subcontractors, who they are, who they're wishing to bring forward to be part of their contract as a subcontractor under the prime.
And then you have to have a surety bond and a performance bond or something like that. Am I
For your
correct?
public works, there's statutory requirements, and yes, they do require bonding, performance and payment bond. By law, they call it a public construction bond that incorporates both the performance and payment bonds.
Now, my mind goes back a few months ago. I believe we had a contractor that for whatever reason, he or she or whatever the company was not doing it to the specification of which they took the job on. I think one was in South Tampa in the southern part of District 6 and the northern part of District 4. And the other one was in Armenia heading north. When you passed Waters Avenue, you couldn't move. I remember going, what happened here? I didn't even know it was closed. And that company was out, right?
We had two contracts where there were defaults. One was brought to council as a takeover agreement, and we're in the process of working that out. The takeover agreement has been executed. The surety was Frankenmuth on that. There were some issues on the project, so we are negotiating out the finals as to getting the job completed. The other is still in the works for the Armenia.
I'm not an expert. I don't do this kind of work at all. But the bonding company then had to take over the project, but if I recall, we couldn't take over who was gonna do the finished work. They had to get the company that they chose to finish the project. Am I
Correct. Correct. On the takeover, the bonding, the surety does that. And quite recently, there have been some issues in that regard. On our particular takeover agreement, it most likely is going to come out to be much more beneficial to us as the city than other jurisdictions that have suffered the same consequences with the same firm.
And I'm not
Because
opposed
we
to
had the
discussing none
takeover
of these
agreement.
things. I just wanna make clarity that, as far as I know anyway, maybe someone knows something I don't know. We done everything according to Hoyle, and Hoyle never existed, but that was the name that came out, I guess. I don't know, I learned that in school somewhere. And they said Hoyle and stuck with me. But I thought it was Hoyt Wilhelm, but it was Hoyle, who was not a baseball player. But I mean, I see the things that come through, and I see and is the same committee all the time, or they have different people on the committee at different times?
For
I don't know
CCNA, the CCNA committee depends upon who the end user is. If it's water, you're going to have water personnels. We always have a member from EBO. They will be on the committee, contract administration people, but always end users, whether
And
like water, mobility, whatever.
Contract administration, is there a responsibility to review the job as it's going on and make sure it's done according to the contract?
Yes, there will be project managers.
All right, thank you very much.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, just quickly sum up, Marty, I'm just speaking for myself, but the most important thing to me is not about the information that council can get. Those resources are great, there's lots of information online, but we have to answer the public, and I think it's best from a transparency point of view to have some presentation of this to us in a public forum so that the public can see that we're not hiding anything. Most contracts are not questioned, but there are enough that are questioned that they become legend in the community, and we could avoid all that if we provided some transparency. And an example I would give would be the concession contract at the airport a few years ago. What's your friend's name, Michael?
Michael Stevens.
Michael's. I mean, somebody at the airport would. It doesn't have to be another city that might be able to give some great ideas, but that was a process where they split up the contract. They widely publicized it. They had forums on it. The CEO, Joe Lopano, stayed out of the process so nobody would accuse him of any kind of favoritism. Compare that to Atlanta, where our former airport director went and the FBI jumped in and looked at it. Or compare that to the convention center RFP here for concessions that was like 6 years ago, where the first time anybody saw it was in the paper, where it was there were all kinds of allegations against it. So we need to make sure that the public is aware of what's happening, that the process is going to be handled in an open way, and not just a legal way, but an open way that everybody can see what's going on. We need to make sure it's competitive, that everybody understands it. Putting it on Demand Star is not enough. We need to make sure everybody understands it. I mean, why is it that sometimes selling land in the past only had one bidder? I mean, how is that even possible? And one of the contracts we had within the first few months, we started 4 years ago, was to give away 3 lots, and there was only one bidder to pay 0 for it. And then we need to make sure that the process is fair and transparent, that everybody knows what the criteria is in advance and that we're following it. If a criteria is that somebody has to be within 30 miles and it turns out that the winning bidder is exactly 30 miles, that's not a fair process. Also, I proposed a process a few months ago when we were talking about charter amendments where the mayor could recuse him or herself. And even if the legal department says there's not an actual conflict, it would be a good idea sometimes for the mayor or certain administrators to recuse themselves. If you have a family member that's participating in any way with any company around it, I think just like we have to disclose it hand in a form, I think there should be a process where, whether it's an administrator or the mayor or whomever, where they would publicly say, for the sake of the public, I'm staying out of this process. I'm not going to be involved at all. I'm not going to put my finger on the scale. We've set up another committee that's going to look at it. Nobody's going to put their finger on the scale later. And that would help, because people find out, the media finds out, and then suddenly we get calls the situation we have is that the public doesn't know anything, we don't know anything, because they don't have time to go research all the stuff you just showed, and then suddenly we get calls from reporters that people, the public and competitors feel blindsided by things weren't happening. And the last thing I mentioned is open-ended contracts. The lawyers I showed, the Hannah Avenue CCNA opinion disagreed with it, but we should not have any situation where a contract lasts more than a few years, and definitely there should be no situation where a contract goes from 400,000 to 121 million. I understand the reasons why somebody might want to do that, but there should not be open-ended contracts where somebody in a department or in the contract administration department can just pick the same firm over and over again. There needs to be some kind of public process that brings everything back up. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilman Goods, this was your motion. Did you want to make any other type of motions?
No, I'm good.
Ms. Zellman.
I just want to make a couple of points. I do think Marty's suggestion, one of the things we've been talking about with Marty is, when we start the new term, having a orientation session, which I think will be helpful both for any new members of council, but also the returning members of council. And I do think it was very helpful for me, for instance, to hear Greg Spearman's presentation, which we asked him to do for the legal department, on how the purchasing process works. So I think that would be helpful for council. But just a couple of comments. One of you made the comment, like, there needs to be an opportunity for council to weigh in. Marcy's the expert, not me, but the competitive bidding, all the purchasing processes that are governed by statute and governed by city code are all designed to keep the politicians out of it and to keep the politics out of it. So that really, the whole design of the process is to not have the parties weighing in. So that's to make it as fair as possible. There were comments made about single bids or no, where we only get one bidder. Keep in mind, some of the things that the city can't avoid, like having insurance requirements, bonding requirements, whatever, is going to cut some people out. Also, every time we add things to our code, like EBO, small business, preference for local businesses, apprenticeship requirements, hiring former imprisoned people, some of the other things we've talked about over the years, kind of the social justice things that we add into our contracting process. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of that is it can shrink the pool of people who then want to contract with the city. It's an inevitability. We have to weigh the pros and cons of all of that. So I'm not being critical. I just want to remind people of that. And then there was one comment about the mayor recusing herself. Again, the mayor is not involved in these processes until after an RFP or RFQ or CCNA rankings are given to her. In that case, my understanding is she makes the final selection in that CCNA world which is limited to, I believe, architects, lawyers, engineers, and one other kind of contract. But basically, again, she doesn't get to put her finger on the thumb during the process either. And again, it's all these, in government world, that the purchasing and the RFP, RFQ processors are particularly designed that way to keep the politicians out of it, to keep the elected officials out of it, to keep anyone from playing favorites. So anyway, I just wanted to make those general comments, but I do think it would be very helpful at some point in time to schedule a workshop item just to give everyone an overview of how these processes work, because you all hear about it after the fact. It's good to know how the process works for all of us.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, just if we do that, my request would be that we not go through all the details of how the process works. Just if we could focus on how it's open and competitive and fair, and and transparent. Those are the things that the public really cares about.
Right.
And then if you have Part B, which is going into the minutia, then whoever wants to opt in can. You mentioned having Mr. Spearman come. After I first raised questions 4 years ago about purchasing, he brought me into his department right away, and he said, okay, tell me the concerns you have. And I went through all the cases that people had given me over the prior years, and all of them were in either contract administration or real estate. And so we need to make sure that that we don't just look at purchasing, that we also look at contract administration and real estate.
No, in fact, I think most of the projects that the council tends to care about are in that CAD world. Because those are the big ticket construction projects. They're in the CAD world and not the purchasing world, which again is something it took me a while to realize. And that's the type of thing I think would be helpful, again, for all of council to just kind of understand who does what and how different things are done. And one final thing that I don't know that Marty mentioned is that one thing to keep in mind is that once a request for proposal or request for qualifications is issued, and again, this is statutorily required, you have what's called the cone of silence, which unlike the cone of silence that the two of us who are old enough to remember Get Smart would remember, which was a joke, it's a very, very, very serious thing. And if any bidder or, person submitting a proposal violates it, they're automatically disqualified. And the way that cone of silence works, and Marcy can correct me if I'm saying this wrong, is, once it is invoked, the bidders, the companies seeking the work are given one point of contact at the city that they can talk to, and they can talk to no one else. And so, for instance, if a city council member were to talk to a bidder about their proposal, that could disqualify that bidder. So it's very serious. So we need to, yes, we want transparency, but there is also a period during which you can't violate that cone of silence.
Yeah, just to finish, and on that point, I think maybe Marcy and Marty also can help us with some advice before also. I think we need to be, not right now, but we need to be particularly careful also about people that approach us in advance of an RFP. We don't have control over who's chosen, but when anybody tries to approach me and say there's an RFP coming up, even if it hasn't been filed, I say, no, I don't want to talk about it. But back to the point about a mayor, and I'm not talking about this particular mayor, but if a mayor has, for example, a family member who's involved with a company that's getting a contract, even if the mayor is not on the selection committee, I think that a mayor, I think there should be a process for a mayor to recuse themselves, because if they end up signing the documents and holding a press conference on it, it creates a lot of questions for us in the community. And it would be better if a mayor said, hey, I've got a family member that works there, and as a result of that, I'm going to step back and not participate in this. I'm not going to make the announcement, and let chief of staff or the chair of the city council or something do it. So that's it. Thank you.
And if Marcy, if you can just follow up, I'm just sorry, because you raised a very good point that it's more than one person. It's not just one contact person, but there's also the legal contact person as well.
Right, according to our ordinance, it can be whoever the soliciting department is, contract administration, purchasing, the director, legal, or whoever the particular facilitator is within the document, the solicitation itself. I think one other thing about open and fair, all of these meetings, the pre-proposal conferences, the presentations for CCNA, they're all open meetings, and they are noticed. Anyone can attend those.
And with regard to transparency, maybe that's one thing that we can work on with the administration to improve the website, to make such things easier to access and have them grouped together, so that the message that I hear is what you're looking to see. Councilman Carlson, is a process where everything is open, competitive, fair, and transparent. And I'm glad Marcy mentioned, because I was going to mention as well, the fact that those committee meetings and those committee rankings are open to the public.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Sidwell. And along the process of transparency and getting the mediums out, don't that committee grade all the different companies, wherever they're by points, and at the end, they show you the score to everyone?
And Marcy can speak to that, about the committee rankings. They have different scores.
Right,
Well,
the committee
they showed-
rankings, they are available in the documentation. People do public records requests for those. The rankings are available, and whoever's top ranked, you know, they are the first selection to send to the mayor. Usually, for the presentations, there's a ranking, then there's presentations. This is for CCNA. There's presentations, and depending upon what the rankings are, after the presentations, they'll have 3 that they will list to go to the mayor, and usually it's the first ranking that she will say go forward and negotiate a contract.
And by the way, council has taken action, and the legal department has, it's coming back to council again with that $20 million threshold, requiring it to appear on the agenda to a meeting prior to when council has to vote on it. I think that also gives you the opportunity. As I recall in the past, and I'm acting from my memory, but I believe there was a time that the city council in the backup did have more material in the backup with regard to contracts. For instance, the rankings, the sheet that was the scoring sheets. I don't know whether that, at some point I recall seeing those. Even with real estate, the previous council made the request to have I'm at a loss for words, the appraisal for the property to be included in the backup, because we had one particular council member and made the motion to have the appraisals be included when there was a contract for sale as well. But that's council's pleasure. But I understand what the message that I hear from council is, that they're looking for a process. Again, we talk about transparency and having it open. And with regard to that, perhaps there are ways we can improve getting that information to council and getting it to the public will assist you. But this is all a very good discussion, and I will follow up.
Again, Councilman Goose, is anything else you want to do on this?
That's it. Maurice already says he's gonna look into it.
Okay,
Thank you, council.
thank you. One, two. All right, information and reports. Councilman Miranda.
I had one, I think I said it earlier, but I didn't put it in a proper form. On the April 14th Citizen Budget Advisory Committee met, and passed a motion to request that Tampa City Council invite the committee to present to council on June the 22nd.
A motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
One other thing, I want to say thank you to the 2 gentlemen who are to my right that have served the city for 4 years. I enjoyed working with both of you, and I've learned some from you, and I hope you learned some from us. And remember my old saying, I have never lost an election. I just never got enough votes. So you go to life that way, and you never get mad at yourself. And I've lost elections.
Councilman Goode.
Did Amari leave, the police officer leave?
Amari, I think he's still outside. No, he's not. He's here. Amari?
Gentlemen, I'd like to say thank you to Amari. I'd like to give him a commendation. Amari Elmore, next week will be his last day of city council. He will be retiring. I know what that day feels like when it gets near. I know what it's like when you wake up the next morning thinking you got to go to work and like, where's my car, where's my badge and my gun? So I know what that feeling's like. And it's a great feeling. So for me, what you've done here, since I've been here, I want to make sure that you got recognized in a proper way and get you an accommodation for next week.
Appreciate it.
It's well deserved, and you've been here for us.
Second.
And again, Mass Patrol Officer, retired on May 6th with Tampa Police Department, who has served since May 2000. 23 years of service, 17 years in a SWAT team, and to be given on April 27, 2023.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We have a motion made by Councilman Goode, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Motion passes. Councilwoman Hurtak.
Nothing.
If I may have staff return to us on May 18th for the CUP people that we heard from today.
Well, if you could
What does
state
it
that
stand
motion?
for? I have to, what is it? Thank you so much for Coffee Uniting People, for staff to come back reporting on having some sort of an agreement for them to sell coffee on city premises, maybe at the courtyard, whatever, once a month.
Second.
A motion made by Councilman Vieira, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Motion passes.
And that's it. Thank you.
Second.
Councilman Carlson.
Three quick things. Jack Harris has been posting online. Have you all seen this?
Yep.
He's posting that he wants a Hall of Fame. He wants City Council to do something. Sorry. Walk of Fame.
He's been asking for that for years, but there's been no place to put it. And I recommended to him when the West Riverwalk opens up, that would be perfect. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just thought it would be fun to invite him. I don't know if he's available, but I think it'd be fun to invite him on June 1st. We can always change it, just to present for 5 minutes on
Try to beat the walkway.
Walk of Fame.
A motion
June
made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
And second, I'd like to do this while this council is still here. Twice before I presented the Tampa scorecard numbers in a 10-minute presentation. It's taken a couple years to get the new numbers, but it'll be a new council. But I appreciate being able to speak for 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes, about the Tampa scorecard on June 22nd.
Are you presenting it?
Yeah, I will bring I may bring a USF economist, but.
All right, second.
Motion made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Motion passes.
Last thing is, I understand that Chuck Weber is leaving, and I don't know when he's leaving exactly, but I think we should give him some kind of accommodation for his years.
Chuck Weber.
Chuck Weber.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to go to Kissimmee, and his wife also works in the same type of business in the water in Pinellas County. The drive was just 30, 40 miles a day round trip, or 50 miles sometimes.
I left him a message the other day. I especially was tough on him in the beginning, but I found in the last year or two he was very collaborative, and he was very focused on water quality and in the areas we disagreed with in the last couple of years.
It's going to be a
We had
big,
great
big
conversation.
loss.
So,
Second.
what's the date that is there? We can't do it next Thursday, can we?
May 4th.
I believe, May 4th?
Yeah,
That would be
that's
the
a regular meeting, I think.
Okay.
I think the beginning of May.
If he's not available, then somebody can give it to him remotely.
May 4th?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? No.
Move to receive and file.
Second. Motion received and filed by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Vieira. Without objection, we're adjourned. Yes, I.